back to another episode of the ADHDads. I'm your host, CJ.
And I'm JJ.
And here we are a year later, a year in review, JJ. I can't believe that we started this December 22nd of 2023 or 2022. And here we are wrapping the year up, bud. So how's it been for you, man? How you feeling about this journey so far?
Yeah, it is fun because obviously I think one thing that's pretty obvious about this podcast and our excitement toward it and our energy that we put toward it all the time is it's very much a passion project that we put our heart and souls into, and I've been very grateful the fact that we can talk about stuff that affects our everyday life and means so much to us because we give a damn about our families. It's been a powerful journey, and there's just so much more ahead that I'm excited to continue this journey. One thing that I find funny is that, it is a passion project. What does that usually mean? It means let's get to it when we can sometimes, and we want to do it every week, but sometimes life hits us pretty hard, and we've had our behind the scenes so people don't necessarily see it. So we release an episode and then we miss a week, not intentionally, but because
I feel like you're shaming me for my flakiness, JJ.
No, buddy, it was funny. I remember one week where we both were talking about we got to get an episode released, and then we both said, yeah, maybe later this week. And I was like, yeah, maybe later this week. We were both feeling it, so I think that's just kind of a fun thing is that, to admit is that this is very much a two-man show, and we're putting in all of our love to it. And that's part of the journey is that we do have some ups and downs, and we did have a couple missed weeks, but it wasn't something where we felt bad. We just realized, hey, life is calling, and that's okay. And we can talk about it later, and we can share with the listeners, this is part of our journey. This is what we learned. And so I don't know, there's just so much more ahead that I'm grateful for it. And I love that we did as much as we've already done.
Hey, look, I think that we've had a great track record for two dudes with ADHD to make it a year, and we've only missed 2, maybe 3 episodes, maybe 2-3 weeks at most. So I think that's pretty good, man. I'm locking it in as a win in the consistency department.
Oh, absolutely. I just love because to anybody who's listened to the last few episodes, it's like we've had quite a few guests on, and then in the last couple episodes we're like, we should try to do the outro a little bit different, but we did it in the moment. So we had a little bit of stumbling around. I'm CJ, I'm JJ, pause, wait, oh, we didn't prep them. I love the learning process. I love it. It's been so much fun.
I've learned a lot in the last year, we'll say that.
Yeah. So what are you excited about going forward? What are some things that we could talk about that you're looking forward to? And I know we have a lot to talk about just in this episode already that we're going to get to as well.
Man, yeah. Well, I haven't really brought up on the show before, but for our listeners, I've been training for a new position with a company where I'll be working as an autism behavioral technician. So what that means is they're training me in ABA therapy, and I will go and hang out with autistic clients. And this age can range anywhere between 2 years old, from infants to, in their 20s and 30s. And I go and I, play with them, hang out with them, talk with them. And we have objectives that we work towards, whether it be verbal or arithmetic or emotional processing or sensory stuff. We just kind of play and work. And I thought that this was a great opportunity to dive into the community, to learn everything that I can, and to bring that home to my family and my daughter. It's been extremely rewarding. So I'm really looking forward to moving into the new year and really being active in the neurodiversity and ASD community.
Man, I am really curious about that range of age. What does that look like 2 years old? Honestly, buddy, when my brother was diagnosed with autism, which he's, in his 30s now, later 30s.
And when was he diagnosed?
Yeah, he was diagnosed pretty young, but still the idea of a 2-year-old being diagnosed back when he
Yeah,
was diagnosed
right.
was just not heard of.
No
That
kidding.
was just something like 3 years old. We're lucky if we get to start talking about diagnosis at that age back then. But now you're saying 2 years old all the way up to, like you said, what, 30 years old? That's
Yeah.
fascinating to me. What does that look like? What is your training telling you to expect about somebody who's 2 years old?
Well, one of the things that I want to bring up too that I really have found fascinating too is, the mindset 20 years ago in this field was like, if you don't catch ASD early on and start behavioral intervention or therapy or emotional regulation techniques, like you're basically out of hope. Once they hit a certain age, like there's no changing behavior. So you got to do it this early, and you got to be very proactive about it, because once they hit adulthood, if you haven't been proactive, they're going to be needing home to be in the home or help or constant caretaking. But research over the last 20 years has proven different, that neuroplasticity is in fact a thing, and it doesn't matter what age you start at, that the brain can be molded and changed and adapted if done in the right way. So I thought that was like cool and interesting, because we have been in our, I remember a year ago talking about this journey. We're talking about ADHD, and one of our first guests on was an advocate for Chad. He worked for Chad, the website, and he was coming on talking. And one of my questions was like, well, what happens to neurodiversity once we get older? Like you never hear anybody talking about adult ADHD, or what happens to these autistic children once they grow up and integrate into society. Where are the stories there? What happened? They all just get thrown in a home and forgotten about, and over the last year, we've talked to a lot of adults with ADHD, with ASD, that have even been diagnosed later in life, and have expressed to us some techniques that have been helpful for them, or some behavioral things that they've learned along their journey that have been beneficial to their growth. So I thought that was like really interesting and cool, to see that like there's not like a loss of hope in any of this part of the journey, that there's always, with the right tools and the right training and the right understanding of neurodiversity and ASD and ADHD, we can show up for our friends and family and children, and help them grow and be successful. But as far as like diagnosed young, that's interesting to me too, because both you and I are in the same situation of not really starting the journey until we were in 6 years old, and my wife is in the educational system, and she said usually that's usually about the right time when they start looking at it in the public school systems, at least, or private school systems, is right when that second, third grade mark is like when you can start paying attention. But I've known personal family friends too that have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds that have gotten diagnosed. And I think that when you get an early diagnosis like that in 2-3 toddler age, you're looking at more like level 2, level 3 ASD, where the nonverbal and the sensory issues are like very noticeable and problematic at a very young age. Where level 1, like where we may be with our children and our journeys, they can communicate, but you may notice a little bit of like a lack of progression in the talking, walking, being able to eat certain things, textures or that kind of thing. But, I think, yeah, the level 1 ASD folks probably get a later diagnosis because it's harder to spot, especially like we talk about in girls and in girls of color.
Yeah, and I know Kristen Carter on our previous episode talked about the idea of having the privilege of receiving a diagnosis and being able to work with and manage your symptoms and stuff. That was something that I want to highlight too. Is there are a lot of people out there who simply don't have the resources and the luxury of being able to be diagnosed and then get those resources and tools to help them succeed. So that's something that weighs on my mind, is that I'm one of the lucky ones who has been able to help my son along his journey. And we just finished up his IEP meeting this last week, and we're moving forward with something. And there's a lot to unpack there, and there's a lot to be grateful for, to be honest. That I'm really excited and also a little bit anxious, to be honest with you, with the next phase of this educational journey that he has. But I guess, you mentioned earlier the idea that the neuroplasticity is something that can, that exists throughout our journey of life. But what are some of the benefits of getting a diagnosis early? How do we get ahead of that, and what does that do for our journey and our development?
Well, some of the statistics that I've been reading along this training too say that, children or adults that have the proper team with them, therapists, psychologists, and certain resource tools, are 69% more likely to be successful in their growth and independence in life. So that right there is huge to me. All we have to do is like dedicate time and effort to this. And it's not like, well, this thing is now a preventative thing that will destroy my child's success for here on out. Like, with the right conversations and the right people and the right support, oftentimes people with neurodiversity are successful and can learn how to not integrate into society, but rather how to integrate themselves into challenging situations. Because one of the things that I've really been learning here too is, and something that we've kind of learned in our own personal experience with this, is neurodiversity has a tendency to show up as like, no, I need this my way to get through this, and you telling me to hurry up and wait along with everybody else in this line and to take the test and to study the cue cards is not my jam, baby. I got to do it my way. And uh, there's a lot of pushback, I think, from old mindset society of like, well, not everybody's, you can't be a helicopter parent, you can't bulldoze, you can't, no, society and life is not going to cater to your kid, you know? Well, I also found it kind of interesting that the statistics of where we're at with diagnosis. In 2003, 1 out of 164 kids was diagnosed with autism. In 2019, 1 in 52 kids is diagnosed with autism. So, is society evolving into a autistic mindset kind of mode of operation? Maybe the old mindset society is outdated. Maybe this is the natural progression of human evolution to think and operate this way. So there's just a lot more of these kids and members of society. So shit, JJ, I think it's kind of our job as parents to figure out what society is going to look like for the next generation, for these kids that think and act differently. And I think that, like, what a wonderful opportunity that we get to be a part of this transition of understanding of consciousness and perception, because it's really taught me a lot in my growth, and like how my daughter thinks and operates, and how limited my own perspective and experience has been, and how our relationship and communication has really opened my eyes to like, wow, the world works in a lot more ways than just black and white. Even though my neurodiverse daughter sees the world in black and white, she teaches me to see all these gray areas with that perspective. So I think that important for us to give our kids tools to let them have autonomy over their mind, body, space, and emotions, rather than trying to get them to fit. Well, society says you have to act this way, so get with the program. It's like, how can we teach them to create that for themselves, to create compromise, autonomy, and control
Mm,
over themselves?
yeah. I think back to my journey through school, and I had this, no offense to any of the teachers in high school whatsoever, but I had said to myself, and I think I vocalized it a number of times as well, that I could have just went straight from grade school to college and just skipped over high school. I didn't really learn much in high school. It was more of the same. It wasn't really challenging what I wanted to be challenged in, and I didn't really have a focus point. I was just doing general education. And I got to college, and you still had to meet the general education requirements and stuff to get to eventually your major. And to me, that's been problematic for many years. Essentially, that's the old model, right? The idea that we're all going through the same process to eventually work the on the line at the factory. But I think with something like, ADHD and autism, in a way, it's not an intentional way, but it is an unintended way to kind of try and buck that system and say, I know what I like, I know what I'm interested in, and I'm going to want to focus on that. So when we have our kids sitting in the classroom and doing what everybody else is doing, they feel uncomfortable. They don't feel like this makes sense to them, and they therefore are distracted by their own internal dialogue. And so in some ways, I really like the idea of giving a lot of understanding and support to that type of mentality, because that mentality, I don't know, in some ways, is just simply saying, I know what I want, I know what I don't want, and I want to move forward. Now, of course, at the same time, I do think, I don't always like a lot of mathematics, but I like some math. And then my kiddo is frustrated by mathematics. But I do think that there is value in still, receiving education in a broad spectrum in order to, find that ultimate I guess, success in the area that you want to pursue, because, mathematics finds its place pretty much everywhere. Obviously, reading and writing does as well. But I think the thing is that we've been so fearful as a society to try and evolutionize, or, yeah, try to evolve our education system to match where a lot of this is trying to push it. So, I'm not saying like autism is coming out because human beings are no longer satisfied with the status quo, but I do think our little individuals who have autism, ASD, ADHD, I think there's something there that is waiting to come out and really just blossom and, explore, and it's stunted by a system that just simply doesn't understand how to evolve. And that's what I'm curious about seeing moving forward here. I don't know. Through our last year here, we've talked about executive functioning, and we've talked about just, I guess, all the things revolving around ASD, and even our own lives have evolved in this process as we learned more about our kiddos, and trying to find the best track for us as families and for our kids as students of the world. I think we're still in that journey, but we're finding for ourselves, at least in our families, we're finding ourselves a great opportunity to really help them succeed and to feel loved and cared for and heard. And so I don't know. There's just a lot more ahead. I know we'll continue to talk about it through this episode, but I've got a specific type of diagnosis for my kiddo as it relates to school, more so than it just relates to his life in general. So how does he fit in? That's something that I'm continuing now reading about, thinking, oh, geez, we have to look at this from a new perspective, because there's something within him that is being almost denied simply because he is expected to go through the motions. But it's more complicated than that, and now we have to try and find that happy medium. It's not easy.
Yeah, and it can be expensive too, right? I one of the statistics that I was given in my journey here, is the life cost of autism resources, runs about close to $7 million, therapies and diagnoses and all of this stuff. So, I think that's why it's really, there are places out there though that I think can help facilitate this stuff, like community centers, regional centers, or this company Positive Development that I'm working with, that really kind of helps like package like your therapist, your psychiatrist, like your behavioral technician, and support for the parents and classes, and IEP addressed stuff. And there are stuff out there like that, but insurance sure does like to push back on this stuff, and that's really sad. I hope that we're moving to more of a mindset where mental health, neuro understanding is researched and talked about more,
Yeah.
because we're real quick, man, to give you a pill to make your constipation go away, but it gives you anal leakage. We're real quick to like fix the body with some chemical that you pay for. But when it comes to the mind, it's just like, well, don't really know what to do. So just got to just walk
Yeah.
away from it. We're not going to cover that,
Yeah.
And I think that's really sad, because I think that it should be the most important aspect of our health is the mind. The mind is the
Mm.
engine, man. It's what sends the signals down to the rest of the body, right? Like we got to take care of that first,
Yeah.
and I think we don't have the time or patience to in society
Well,
today, and that saddens me.
I would say that I and my co-parents were fairly well equipped to provide the support for a kiddo, but at the same time, let's be honest. We are co-parents. We pay high rent in a high rent city, and so a lot of our resources are already, claimed at the end of the day. And so we do rely honestly on others to help us along the way. So with this IEP journey, we had to, rely on the teacher's feedback, how kiddo was performing in school, and what it looked like, in his, recess time, or just his, his social interactions with kiddos while at school. And when they started to report certain things, okay, that helped us get information that we otherwise wouldn't get on our own because it's a different environment than at home. So, I can set up a home environment for my kiddo to help him succeed in this space, but that doesn't necessarily, translate to school. So I guess what I'm saying is, we are in the public school system. We are like I've mentioned before, we're in a public charter school, and there's honestly some major benefits. In fact, we had a conversation with his teacher just the other day who has a son with ASD and ADHD. And just she said that it was like a godsend for him to go to this school. It was basically like the idea of it takes a village was part of being in this school, which to me sounds like the best possible position you can be in. But there's a lot of people who don't have those resources and don't know where to go next. One thing that I would like to cover on a future episode is let's give a possible roadmap for people who are trying to figure out, how do I help my kiddo? I'm in this situation, because that's really hard for so many of us, even hard for myself. I definitely would say I feel like I have no say, and I have my hands tied behind my back as to what I'm able to provide for my kiddo, and that sucks. And I hate to hear that that's not an uncommon story for a lot of people. But for us, again, like, okay, I'll just run down briefly the IEP findings. I don't know, we'll call it that. It was an interesting meeting. Like the principal, kiddos' teachers were there, the special education teacher, and for about the first 15 minutes, there was also a psychologist, a school psychologist there. And the first thing was basically like, yeah, he has ADHD AF, essentially. So very much a diagnosis of ADHD. But what I really was fascinated to hear through this was through the testing and the evaluation it was more or less found that he is entirely capable academic wise. So he's doing fantastic academic wise. And that's honestly, every parent would be very happy to hear that. What he struggles with, of course, as one would expect with ADHD, ASD, is that ability to remain focused, that ability to interact with others, and to have essentially a social relationship with anybody they come into contact with that is not necessarily a disruption to himself or to the people that he's in relationship with. So when it comes to the classroom, he might be able to perform well, but if he's not in a good space mentally, he's going to struggle. And that's a tough thing for him. That's a tough thing for his parents to hear. But then now what we're looking at doing, Bud, this is something that I don't have enough data on because we're brand new to this process, is more or less the first part of the day, the first half of the day is, when kids split up and go to different classrooms, he's going to go up to the special education room because he can stay focused better up there. And I don't know exactly what that day looks like, but if that's the truth, I'm really fascinated by that because they get one-on-one instruction, or they get instruction directly from teachers in the classroom, and then they do some independent work and they do rotations. So all that is essentially thrown out the window, and he has packets of homework. He has assignments, and he has a special education teacher there, essentially like she's a catch-all to do everything, which I find amazing. What an amazing person this person can be, to come to have a kid from any grade come to her room and say, okay, we're going to work on this, and then just honestly be there for support, to tutor essentially. Like, I'm amazed that an individual exists like that. So we are very lucky in that respect. The concern that I had when I first heard about this new schedule was it came into play that my schedule when I was young is I had a teacher for every subject. Like, I should say my teacher taught every single subject. So 7th grade, we had one classroom. That teacher taught every single subject to all the students in the class. And when I applied that to my son's situation, I was worried because I thought, well, now he's being split up from his peers, and then he's going to see them again at recess. Like, that sounds very hard for him socially. But then I realized, well, shoot, actually, he sometimes goes to this classroom for, writing and reading. He goes to this classroom for math. Then everybody's split up and then brought together through lunch, through recess and stuff. Maybe this is okay. So we're still in a very early learning process of his IEP, and I'm honestly really fascinated by what it's gonna look like, and I'm honestly very anxious, but I'm still hopeful because it doesn't look like what I had when I was growing up, which is one teacher for every subject. Perhaps that's going to help bridge the gap here. I don't know. So yeah, we've got a lot to learn, and I'm excited and scared, and I'm hopeful.
And I think most parents, including myself and my wife, have also been there and felt like that, right? Like, we do as parents go through in our own way, and that may look different, to each parent, but we do go through the 5 stages of grief with a diagnosis, you know? And when I first heard that, I was like, not me. I was like, I was happy when we got the diagnosis. It was like, finally, we can understand this. But as you like really look into what those 5 stages of grief are, oh, we experienced it, brother. We experienced it in our household. It just looked different than most people maybe externalize that. But it was all there. It was all the like, nah, the denial phase. That's not us. My daughter doesn't have that. No, it's ADHD. That's what we came in here for, not autism. And then it's like, oh wow, there's this anger. And for me, I thought I didn't go through the anger. I was proud of that, but there was that anger still there, JJ, because we talked about on this episode, when we go out and my wife would say, well, my daughter has autism. She'd give up that information right away. And I'd sit there and go, I don't know how I feel about that. That was my anger phase of that grief. you know that was well, I don't know if we need to tell people, you know we don't need, everybody doesn't need to know. And then there's that kind of like revolt to the blame, right? The shifting of blame the displeasure in the educational system. Well, my daughter's just never going to get what she needs. They're not going to take care of it. They don't understand her. They push back on this ASD. See, they told us no 3 times before they finally approved this diagnosis process. So like we do go through all of these stages. They just look different. So it's really, and some parents get locked into a stage. They get that denial phase and they say, nah, my kid doesn't have that. I'm not even going to look into it. I'm not going to say my kid has that. I'm not going to admit that. And man, I'm not saying any of this is wrong. Like this is human nature and psychology in process here. I just want to say, like, I've gone through it too, and it is hard. But I think, like, when we recognize it, I was just talking to another woman too that I'm going through this training with, and she said she has a child with Down syndrome, and she also has a grandchild with autism that just recently got diagnosed. And she was talking about when she was a young mother and her kid got diagnosed with Down syndrome. She went through this huge denial phase for like 6 months and said, no, he's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. He's 2 years old at this point, and denied it. And then she said she made the next year about her, about how hard it was for her, how difficult it is to have this diagnosis and all the feelings that she was going through and how nobody was there for her. She had no support and how it was just hard all the time. And then here she is, her kid is 26 years old now. And she says that she still regrets that she wasted that year of her life making it all about her, and I thought that was powerful.
Oh, yeah, and you just want to give somebody like that a hug and say, it's impossible not to feel and to feel the effect on yourself as well. Um, have you seen the show Parenthood? Came out years
You've
ago now.
recommended it to me a couple years ago, and I've watched a few episodes, but I stopped it because I wanted to get into it with the wife, and we never picked it back up. But I've seen a handful, yeah.
I want to say it was the very first episode where the son Max, he has issues like keeping his hands to himself at school, and he pushes a kiddo, and they decide, okay, it sounds like there's something serious that we need to see a psychologist for at least, and then the psychologist brings up like autism, Asperger's, and there's that moment, there's this scene that just felt so true to life in it, where the wife, she goes to her husband, calls him, middle of the day. They both are just, he's working, but he's also going to spend a little bit of time with her at lunchtime. And she says to him, like, it's they believe he has Asperger's, and the husband, like, right away is like, what, are you kidding me? No, like, the kids who do the hand flapping and stuff, like, that's not him. And you could see her already having processed so much of this and being scared and needing him in that moment to be there emotionally for her, because she was suffering in that moment, trying to tell him, like, I feel lost, I feel scared, I feel concerned here. And he was in that denial phase, like, this doesn't make sense to me. And it was just such a powerful moment, because I do believe people do need to process that for themselves as well, because this does mean, when you receive that diagnosis, I think more than any other moment, it becomes that much more real. Like, we do have a lot ahead of us that we need to help. We need to figure out, and we need to be there to support each other, as well as our kiddo who has this diagnosis. There's so much that a parent goes through emotionally, that they do need to work with themselves, for their family members as well, that even if there's that stage where you're feeling, guilty, you feel selfish and stuff, realize that that's also a part of the process of trying to learn. And what does this look like going forward? I am scared. I don't know if I have the ability. That all feels natural to me. As hard as it is, I think it still makes sense for us to go through that. And if we sit in that and we don't seek out help or seek out support, yeah, that can be a time of our life that just looks like nothing good was coming from it. But if we continue the journey and we do offer that support and our love to the kiddos, like the big thing with it too is like he had rejected the idea of the hand flapping and stuff because that essentially was a label, something that doesn't sound like my unique child in front of me. That sounds like I'm just slapping a label on him and this is where we're going. There's so much more to a parent's perspective than just simply that diagnosis and those symptoms. Like, this is my individual kid here that I love and care for so deeply that I want to reject those things because that's not giving the world the whole picture. And they're basically saying that we need to work with this kid, or dare I say, some people say, oh, we need to figure out how we can manage this kid, rather than simply say, hey, we understand certain things about this kid and we want to help this kid succeed. That's the big thing that I think takes a little bit of a faith at some point to make that jump into the next step. I know with my kiddo, I've had those moments where I feel like some parents just simply reject him because they're not choosing to try and understand him. And that hurts because I know he is not trying to harm anybody, but that's what they get in their head is that, oh, he's just difficult. And then they blame me because they choose not to ask questions. They choose not curiosity. So yeah, I think it makes sense for us as parents to feel that rejection as well, directly aimed at us. It hurts. So to be able to process that, I think we have to. I think we have to have that selfish moment as well, because we're going to try our damnedest, or we should, to help our kiddos succeed and show them the love in who they are as an individual.
You're right. We do need to allow some space and grace to process individually. You know, there's a saying or the mantra or tagline, if you will, in the ASD community is, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. That there are no two children alike in this journey here. And everybody has different expressions, different tics, different some sensory issues or stimulation issues. Sorry, I had to cough.
Bless
Hit the
you.
cough button.
Oh, cough.
There's this girl that I want to get on our podcast, JJ, that I've been watching a lot of videos of. Check her out. She's on YouTube. It's called Carly's Cafe. She wrote a book with her dad about what it's like to have autism. They co-wrote it together from a parent's perspective and a kid's perspective. So I have not read the book yet. I need to research it to bring it up. But check out Carly's Cafe. There'll be links to the book on there, but I'm going to read it over our break. It's going to be my reading material for the holiday break here. And I'm going to reach out, and I really want to get this girl on our show, and possibly her father too, because what a great story, right? And what a great relationship. But she has this YouTube video on called Carly's Cafe. And it's like what it's like being in the perspective of someone with autism. And oftentimes, one of the displays in autism is the brain to verbal communication. So oftentimes, people with ASD will want something in their brain, but they cannot verbalize it. They cannot spit it out. Imagine what that's like, JJ, to just want a glass of water, but every time you try to say water, milk comes out, or nothing at all, or just grunts or sounds. You know, so like, again, my job in an ABA therapist is really to be present and learn, like, not just verbal communication, but, you know, nonverbal, pointing, facial gestures, eyesight can be as simple as just looking at something. And the job of an ABA therapist is really to learn how to recognize those gestures and ask the right questions to get them. So if you see them looking at something constantly, you have to have the wherewithal to be like, is it the drink? You want the drink, but not this drink. You want a clear drink? You want milk, or you want this? And that's what this whole video is on Carly's Cafe. She's in like a Starbucks with her dad and her sister, you know, and she's at the counter, and the guy says, you know, hi, how are you today? Can I get you anything? And she just wants to say coffee so bad, but she can't. And the video is like her locked in her body, you know, like locked in syndrome almost. She's operating her motor functions. She's moving around this cafe, and all she wants is this damn cup of coffee, but she can't say coffee. and everyone around her is trying in their world to help her.
Yeah.
What do you want? You want some milk? Why do you look like that? What can I do to help you? Just tell me what I need to do. Tell me what would make you feel better. What feels best for you? But she can't say it, damn it.
Yeah.
And the dad is sitting there right in front of her drinking this cup of coffee, being so intentional and present with her. Just tell me what it is, honey. And he's sipping on this cup of coffee right in front of her, the damn thing that she wants, that she can't say she wants. And she keeps trying to reach for it, but he keeps taking the coffee away, with the, just tell me what it is you want, sweetie.
Yeah.
And just like, what a gut wrenching truth from both perspectives of this, right?
Yeah.
Like, here, this father is trying so desperately to connect to his daughter, but just can't, just
Yeah.
can't figure out the right way to. And here, this daughter is trying so desperately to connect to her father and communicate what she wants, but she just can't. She doesn't know how. And to think about that struggle in my own life and how frustrated I may get with Naomi and how frustrated she may get with the situation, and not being able to say the right thing, or organize it in the right way. Gosh, that's my job as a parent to help her with that, And too often times we as parents put the emotional homeostasis of our house on our kids. If you would just listen to me, I wouldn't yell. God damn it, that's a 9-year-old. The whole emotional security of your house is based on this 9-year-old's ability to emotionally regulate that? Like, what a miss as parents. Like, we have to be the ones to step up to that and ask the right questions, even if we don't know what they are, you know? So I don't know. I found that was a powerful insight into the a perspective of someone with
Yeah.
ASD.
Patience and curiosity, right? Um, you know, decades ago, somebody, especially as they reached adulthood, somebody who exhibited that type of behavior and communication would be in a home and just basically, not pursued in terms of understanding them. There's a documentary that came out over a decade ago now called Wretches and Jabberers, which I probably mentioned on the podcast previously. And these two men basically travel around the globe, and they have these computers that are designed specifically for them to be able to communicate in the best way possible. So they have their own like type of keyboard that has almost like a court typist who can quickly type out the notes of the minutes or whatever they call it in court. Um, these guys have these computers that help them respond in a quicker manner to the people who don't have neurodiversity around them, and just the articulate intelligence of these men blew me away. They were so thoughtful, so deep in their responses, and one of those men was living in essentially what we would call a mental institution for so many years because he wasn't understood. He didn't have the tools to be able to communicate who he is and what he sees about the world. All that people saw was this hand flapping, this guy who seems to get impatient and has these verbal tics and stuff like that. When really he was like, I'm just trying to operate in my space in order to best show up in this world, but instead was rejected for so long. And you're right. I think that's the big thing is that, we do have to practice so much kindness and patience and curiosity about our kids for them to be able to live in our world, because honestly that's what we're really trying to do a lot of times with somebody we don't understand. We want them to better fit into our world because that makes us comfortable. We get this discomfort when we see somebody hand flapping. We get this discomfort when somebody makes some loud noises in public because it's unusual for a regular everyday experience. But the problem is usually we try and too many of us try to push away from that rather than to try and give it some, give it some curiosity and care. And I think with the ongoing evolution of our understanding of just the amount of prevalence of ASD and ADHD and whatnot, like, we're gonna have to start to really give a damn. Get people too often want to just fit in their boxes, but people with ASD aren't going to allow for it. And I want to see this world evolve to that point where we do, like we talked about Neuralink before actually hitting record here, but I'm not saying Neuralink is necessarily the right approach here, but something that
But
is
would
an assistant.
Neuralink cure autism?
Well, that's the thing,
You
though. It's
know?
not about curing. To me, it's about giving somebody the right resources and tools. Like, okay, let's give a really easy example. Google Translate. I had some guy come in here who only speaks a certain language, and he was trying to find an apartment number in the other building that he didn't realize was there. So then he pulls out his phone and he just holds it up, and I tell him, okay, you have to go down the elevator to the right and then go down the hallway and you'll get to the other building, and that's where that apartment will be. So that immediately translated to him in his language the words that I spoke. And this is essentially what I'm saying with ASD and stuff. It's not necessarily we're trying to make somebody different. It's that we're trying to make that connection possible, because that's where I think we're getting the big miss. And then we put somebody in a corner because we just can't, or we don't want to deal with them, or we can't understand them, and we choose the easier route.
Something to consider, during this training, they said to get into the mind of someone with ASD, picture it like this. Picture having anxiety 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Every second of your life is scary, you're filled with fear, and you don't know how to navigate it. And that was like mind blown, right? As somebody who intermittently experiences anxiety in waves, I've struggled with anxiety my whole life. I take anxiety meds, and sometimes there's good days, sometimes there's bad days. I can't imagine living in an anxious headspace 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. How exhausting that must be. So as stressful it is as for us as neurotypical parents, try putting yourself into not only that someone with anxiety, but someone with anxiety 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. And then not only that, but someone who can't put the brain to mouth signals together to communicate what is making them anxious. But not only that, you're dealing with a 9-year-old who wouldn't have the emotional regulation tools anyways to figure all of that out. So, man, there's a lot of layers there of anxiety that feels so heavy I can't even comprehend it. So something for us to consider as parents. And something else that I learned too was the concept of like understimulation, or lack of or need for stimulation, where my experience has only been with overstimulation. Sometimes, I've seen Cohen with some headphones and get overwhelmed with loud stimulus. Our thing over here, JJ, is texture, whether it be on skin or food. Consistency of food could be a huge thing. Socks are a huge thing. Every day we fight about pants and socks. And I watched this video about this guy with ASD, and he said, this is what it's like wearing socks all day. And he rolls out this whole sheet of tinfoil and takes it and wraps it around his feet, his legs, and then tries to stick his foot with that tinfoil into his shoe. So now imagine walking around like this all day. That's what wearing socks is like to me. And again, I just had this mind-blowing moment of like, Jesus Christ, why do we have to make such a big deal about the socks? And we make such a huge deal about the socks, JJ, because the school says you need to wear socks and you need closed-toed shoes with certain type of laces, So we have to wedge her into the system. We have to take this square peg and put it into this triangular hole and, make her fit into this box with all the other shapes, and it's a constant thing, and Naomi just went to mom the other day and said, "Why do you want me to be uncomfortable all day? Why do you want me to be in pain every day?"
Damn.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, you gotta get creative with this shit. So we went online and we found a pair of closed-toed sandals. They're basically shoodles, shoe sandals. Stop it. She knows I make up words all the time. She's sitting on the other side of this curtain. They're shoondles, okay? But they strap on, they have holes around the side, so she doesn't need to wear socks, but they're closed-toed enough to get around the school dress code. Her feet will be freezing. It's at 35 degrees in the morning here, JJ. In Southern California, it still gets cold here in the morning. So she's going to have little icicle toes, but you know what? That's a lesson she will have to learn on her own. Now we're not the evil sock monsters trying to destroy her life with cotton fabrics. Now we're the supportive parents trying to give her tools and think of creative ways to help her think of creative ways to get around her discomforts. And I think that's what it's about. It's not saying, screw you, kid, be uncomfortable, ha 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 ha, or the school says you have to. There is an in-between. We just gotta get creative with it.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's okay to be creative
Shoondles.
with it. Shoondles. I mean, do we want to try and work with our kiddo and maybe their obsession? We'll be honest, sometimes there are real obsessive thoughts. Do we want to try and work with them and understand them and therefore have them be seen and heard and feel safe? Or do we want them to constantly feel on edge and honestly result in, possibly tantrums all day because we are not really trying to see or hear them? I think ultimately the long game, which really isn't the long game sometimes here, is to work with and understand them and buy them a pair of shoondles if they need it.
Well, I want to go back and touch because I didn't define overstimulation and understimulation and lack or need of stimulation, and I wanted to get to that. Because again, my experience was only overstimulation, right? Like my kid feels stimulation on her skin, she's overstimulated. It's too much. I can't have enough. Cohen feels sound. It's too much. I need headphones. I'm having too much emotion. It's scary. Whatever it is, that's overstimulation. But there's also understimulation. Where like overstimulation would be like you have a little thimble-sized coffee cup, and just one drop of water makes your cup overflow. Understimulation would be you have this giant 5-gallon bucket coffee mug, and you're only getting a drop of water at a time. No matter how much you try to put into that coffee cup, it never feels full, damn it. And kids with ASD not just have overstimulation. They have over, under, and lack or need for stimulation. And I was in this, I missed all of this. I was in this like, oh shoot, I've been missing this. Because I've only been concentrating on the socks and the skin thing and the food thing, because those are the overstimulation things that seem to need the most attention. But my child also gets understimulated in social situations where she wants attention. She needs attention. Everybody needs to pay attention to her. And she could have a group of 10 kids all saying, let's play this game, but it's not enough. She needs more control. She needs, I want to be this, you be this, you do this. She never can feel like her cup of control is full. She always is searching for it. Never feeling satisfied, And I think that it's important that we realize those triggers too, not just the overstimulation, because those are the ones that get the biggest reaction. a 12-hour meltdown over socks or pants on the leg, but those things are there too. And the stimulation of senses doesn't just go on to touch, smell, taste, and sight. It goes to social stimulation, academic stimulation. There's a lot of other senses that go into an ASD child, and I will have to go and get the resource that explains that more, so I know more what I'm talking about. So for the next episode, I will have those other senses defined for you and how they show up in our kids' life. But this is just kind of the brief overview of like what I took away from this part of it, and the lack of stimulation. Again, some ASD kids can't process the brain signals of certain sensations. So some ASD kids walk around and they bump into stuff really hard, or they hit themselves, or they hit their, you may have self-destructive ASD behaviors, kids slapping themselves, pulling hair, hitting themselves. That's because they literally cannot feel their body. That brain signal to pain receptors can be distorted. So some kids, overtly hurt themselves because it's like, oh, now I can feel that part of my body. Oh, that's a sensation that I don't normally feel, so now I feel it. So, and gosh, man, and a lot of the times we try to correct the behavior rather than try to connect with it. And that was the huge wake up call for me. Like, damn it, I'm trying to correct the behavior instead of trying to connect with it. Why, instead of trying to figure out why is this important for her? What calm does that bring to her? And why is this a necessity for her experience? I'm trying to say, don't do that. That's weird. That's, again, I've talked about on my show here, my daughter's thing is toe jam. She needs the in between of her toes wet all the time. That's one of the things why she doesn't like shoes, because she can't put saliva on her fingers and stick them in between her toes, which sounds disgusting. My kid is eating toe jam all day, JJ, but I've been trying to correct that behavior rather than connect with it. So that's a goal for me moving forward, brother. As disgusting as it is, I need to understand why my daughter needs to eat her own toe jam.
Just trying to make sure her feet are comfortable and getting shundles on, and when the shundles aren't doing it, eat some jam. I hear it. Yeah, that's a big one. I think there's a lot that we're going to dive into deeply here in the coming weeks, and so I'm looking forward to that. Giving parents an honestly, a hopeful outlook on something that sometimes can feel a little bit hopeless to them. And again, like, I want to just be given that reminder that if you are in a place where you're feeling down and maybe a little hopeless about your situation, just know that that's a natural part of the process sometimes, and it doesn't mean that that's okay, or it doesn't mean that it's not easy. It's still tough, but giving yourself some grace, and feeling sorry for yourself because you have a lot of work ahead of you with your kiddo. That's okay. Um, we're still working through understanding how I can best show up for our kiddo. One of the big things for us is that emotionally, it's hard to connect with him. And I don't mean like I can't connect with my son and love him. What I mean is that talking about emotions and feelings, that's something that he still doesn't seem to have quite the skills to be able to do. We have an amazing book that did seem to reach him in a place that hadn't been successful before, in terms of me just trying to talk with him. And maybe that's the key. Maybe the having a resource rather than just kind of going, directly from the words within your thoughts, but rather having a resource to help coach both of you in the moment can be of use. I'm not sure, but I can tell you that there's a lot that I'm learning still right now, and there's just so much that we can dive into here in the coming weeks and months to really help you, the listener, and of course help ourselves as we truly do believe that we love every single kiddo, and every single kiddo matters, even the kiddos who exhibit certain behaviors that we're trying to move away from in terms of our discomfort. Yeah, it's best to try and understand and to love and to care, because man, that's going to help us all succeed, and it's going to bring us further away from that place of discomfort as parents, as further away from that hopelessness as parents. Instead, it's going to help us, really find that place of success with our kiddos as we go through that slow journey. And let me tell you, it's a slow journey. It's okay. That is, everybody's journey is a slow journey. Honestly, time is, seems to be fleeting, but honestly, it's still very slow when you think about the development track that we all go through. So, practice that grace and patience. But yeah, well, lot to come. I know, Colton, you're going to be sharing so many more great resources as you continue to learn and train. And like I said, I've got I've got a document. I don't know, it's like 40 some pages to go through here from that meeting. So there's much to share as we continue on.
Yeah, buddy. And for our listeners, we'll probably take the week of January 2nd off, as this episode will be released the day after Christmas. JJ will be driving into town with Cohen, and we're taking a little ADHDad vacation with the kiddos. So we're going to take another week off. So, all right, we made it a full year and we missed 4 episodes. Okay, 1 month, but we'll be back after that with some great guests lined up for you, and we're going to hit the ground running in 2024 with a lot of great resources for you guys. I hope that you're following. If you're a fan of the show, please, the best way that you can support is go on to your podcast platform and leave us a raving review. Just tell us, what you think about this podcast, only if it's good though, and how we've helped support you in your life. And I hope that you are getting a little bit of that from this show. Otherwise, why are we doing it? But I was going to say that, but you know what? We're probably going to still do it anyways. So it's a passion project. It's a love journey of mine. And even if JJ leaves me, I'll probably still be sitting here talking to myself. So thanks for listening, guys. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And this has been another episode of the ADHDads. Have a good 2023 wrap up, and looking forward to 2024 with you. See you next time, guys.